Okay, I'm here today with Ann Terry, ARNP. Ann is at the University of Washington, both at Hall Health and at Environmental Health and Safety. And she is an expert on travel medicine. She's been in that field for many decades, so I'm delighted that Ann could talk with us today. Thank you, Ann.
Thank you so much for having me. I look forward to talking with you about bugs and how to prevent getting bit.
Today, it's all about bug repellent and not getting bit. First question, is there a best bug repellent?
Well, there's quite a few options out there, and sometimes that can get confusing. The CDC acknowledges 5 different types of skin repellents, and the 2 that are generally the most effective are called conventional repellents, and they include DEET, which many people are familiar with, and also picaridin. And then there's 3 types that are more of what we call a biopesticide type of skin repellent, and those include oil of lemon eucalyptus, something called citriodiol, also something called IR 3535, and then a newer one on the block called 2-undecanone, which I'm not as familiar with. The ones that seem to be the most effective are the conventional repellents. So the first 2, which is DEET and picaridin, and those are usually found in formulations that are microencapsulated and long lasting. So they create a barrier on the skin that can last generally up to 12 to 14 hours. But with activity and sweating and swimming and doing your normal kind of travel related things, that can often kind of slough off, and you may need to reapply based on what you're doing. So I tend to focus on the first 2, DEET and picaridin.
Let me cut to the chase. When you yourself go to an area, say with dengue fever, what do you apply to your skin?
When I'm concerned enough about something serious like dengue, I definitely go for DEET lotion. That seems to be my go-to. I do use picaridin a fair amount too, but either of those, and those, just because they're the longest lasting, by far the most effective, cover the most species, and tend to be well tolerated and well studied.
Good. And for DEET, is there a particular concentration that you like?
We generally know that concentrations of less than 50% are going to be the most effective for DEET. 100% formulations of DEET that I'm sure a lot of us used to use can be more effective in the short term, maybe for an hour or 2, but they're not going to give you that sustained protection.
Okay, good, good. So yeah, I know they sell REI sells the 100% jungle juice, but maybe hold off on that.
Yeah, I would.
Hey, DEET, this question is out there. Does DEET cause cancer?
We don't think it does. And the Environmental Protective Agency and another agency called the International Agency for Research on Cancer do not list DEET as a carcinogenic in any form. We do know that in rare cases of probably misuse of strong concentrations of DEET, there have been some neurotoxic effects like seizures, behavioral changes, agitation. But that was in individuals that were using 100% DEET for a prolonged period of time, and that's not what we recommend. What else about that? So I do think DEET is safe, but I only use it in formulations that are under 50% and are long acting, and those formulations that stay as a crust on the outer part of the skin. So not 100% DEET that can be soaked in.
Okay, good. There's a lot on the internet about diet and mosquitoes, about things like garlic and vitamin B12. Is there evidence for benefit from doing things like a high garlic or taking B12 and using that as your insect repellent?
Well, that would be really nice, but what we know is that all of those kind of old wives' tales don't really work for mosquito protection. And they're, generally insects are attracted to us because of kind of our body temperature and odors on the skin. And so a couple of things have been proven that might increase our aptitude for getting bit. One is ingestion of beer.
Oh,
Which is too bad. And another, in a very small study, but there may be some link to eating bananas.
to increased bites.
Yes, to
Oh,
increase
okay,
bites.
okay.
Yeah,
So relying on eating garlic or eating B12, it sounds like is not really supported by studies.
correct. That's correct.
Okay, good, good. Now, the things you've been talking about so far are applied to skin. Um, what about clothing? What should one apply to clothing to minimize insect bites?
There's a really wonderful product called permethrin that can be applied to clothing. And permethrin is a product that's derived from chrysanthemum plants. And we know about it because we use it in mosquito nets throughout the world to help people be safe and have limited malaria exposure at night when they're sleeping under nets. So a long time ago, I think over a decade ago, people started putting permethrin in clothes. And when you spray it into clothing, it's a very effective way to prevent bites from all kinds of insects, such as ticks, mosquitoes, sandflies, etc. It is what's called a contact repellent. So an insect has to actually land on the fabric to notice the permethrin and either fly away or die on contact. So I get a lot of questions of people saying it's not working because they're seeing kind of mosquitoes land on their clothes, but they should immediately fly away or die. Permethrin is used to treat things like scabies and lice in high concentrations on or in creams on skin. So it shouldn't be applied directly to the skin, only to outer clothing. And people often use it to treat hats or socks or shoes, and particularly if they're going to high risk areas. So it can be used for all kinds of clothing. Also, sometimes people do a lightweight blanket or something to cover like a stroller for an infant, which can be really helpful to decrease their risk for bites if they're out in an area with, high mosquito concentration. So I highly recommend permethrin. It's a really great way to prevent bites. And the other thing is you don't have to put permethrin on the skin underneath the clothing. Sorry, you don't have to put DEET or picaridin on the skin. So once you have your armor of your permethrin in the clothes, you can use less of those, skin repellents if you choose to.
So then the DEET or picaridin only goes on exposed skin seeing the air.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Now, just for extra protection, should I put DEET or picaridin on my clothing and permethrin on my skin?
I wouldn't do that because we know permethrin can cause skin irritation. But if you really tend to get lots of bites, you could do both. The other thing I would say is that most clothing, to prevent insects from biting through the clothing, it needs to be more than 1 millimeter of thickness. So you don't want an extremely thin piece of clothing. It should be, a moderate depth to make sure the insects aren't biting through.
Now, for the traveler, suppose somebody's going to East Africa where there's malaria or elsewhere. Is there a role for bed nets for the international traveler?
Absolutely. This is a total must in areas, particularly highly endemic areas of malaria. East and West Africa come to mind. So we know that, nothing is perfect in terms of protection, right? Your malaria pills are highly effective. Your DEET is highly effective, but there's always some percentage chance that you could get bit, for instance, in your sleep. So sleeping under a bed net's just another fail-safe way to minimize bites in the evenings when we know malaria is transmitted.
And what about, should one try to cover up long sleeves, long pants? Any benefit in that?
Definitely, particularly with permethrin soaked clothes. So we know that the more exposed skin without protection, the more potential an insect is to find you and bite you.
Okay. Now, one thing is popular in some places is burning these mosquito coils. Are those of any benefit?
Those tend to be things called spatial repellents, and they also have a type of pyrethroid in them. Sometimes I think it's alethrin or metofluthrin, and those can definitely decrease bites, but they don't tend to show a decrease in disease transmission. So they're more of a decreasing nuisance bites. And we know some of the coils can increase your risk for cancer. So you don't want to inhale a mosquito coil kind of smoke repeatedly.
So it sounds like for sleeping quarters, those might be suboptimal.
I would agree.
Okay, good, good. Now, ticks. We're reading more and more about diseases that are spread by ticks, both the increase of things like Lyme disease and new tick-borne illnesses. For hikers, who are at risk of tick bites, what are some good strategies to reduce the number of tick bites?
I would absolutely have your entire outfit soaked with permethrin if you're in a highly tick infested area. I would do the kind of nerdy thing, which is tucking your pants into your socks when you're walking in grassy areas with lots of ticks. And then I would use the most highly effective skin repellent you can, which would be DEET or picaridin lotion. The other thing I would do is at the end of each day, if I was exposed to ticks, I'd also do a thorough tick check and make sure I'm removing ticks as soon as possible so they don't have any potential to transmit disease to you.
Got it. Got it. So what I'm hearing overall for mosquitoes is DEET or picaridin to exposed skin, permethrin to clothing, sleep under a mosquito net, consider wearing long sleeves and pants. Sounds like all those measures have some benefit.
Yep, absolutely. And sometimes you need to do, change what you're doing, reapply your, skin repellent, maybe, decide if you're getting a lot of bites, decide if you need to leave an area or change your behavior.
And I guess if you want to fully max out, go on a low beer, low banana diet.
Totally.
All right. I don't have other questions. Ann Terry, University of Washington, thank you so much for your time today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.